Well, there you go. You wanted Pitt to get a defensive end. You wanted them to get another defensive end out of the transfer portal, and they did exactly that. The Chief is coming to town. I don't know if they call him the Chief. I shouldn't presume to know his nickname, but Chief Borders, the defensive end from Nebraska. Actually, let's call him a defensive front seven player because he played a lot of different things in Nebraska. We'll get into that in a minute. But a defensive front seven player from Nebraska coming to Pitt to play defensive end, committed as a transfer yesterday. A little Mother's Day gift for Pat Narduzzi and the Pitt coaching staff. In the past, we've always seen the Father's Day massacres where they land a lot of commitments. Well, here we saw one on Mother's Day. Pitt gets a defensive lineman out of the transfer portal. 2 years of eligibility left for Chief Borders. He's coming to Pitt, and we get a lot to talk about with Chief Borders, how he fits in the defense, what he did at Nebraska, how there's a little bit of projection to how he's going to fit into Pitt's defense, and plus, perhaps the weirdest factoid about Chief Borders that we're going to have to talk about. And I don't know what to make of it. I don't know if it's good or it's bad, but it's definitely unique. So let's break down the newest edition of Pitt's 2024 roster here to get your week started on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, there's something really weird about Chief Borders, but we'll get into that in a little bit. We'll save sort of the fun for a little bit. Let's talk a little football first as we get your week started. It's Monday. It's the Morning Pitt. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And as we dive into our discussion of Pitt's newest edition from the transfer portal, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com is where we have all of our late breaking Pitt videos. If there's news that happens, like Pitt landing a defensive end out of the transfer portal, we discuss it right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have our daily Morning Pitt videos, Monday through Friday, and then our weekly live show every Wednesday night. You don't want to miss any of it, so make sure you click the subscribe button right down there and check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Chief Borders, originally from Georgia. Recruiting class of 2021, he was a three-star prospect, a high three-star prospect, committed to Florida. He was at Florida for 2 years, 2021 and 2022, transferred to Nebraska this past year, 2023. Now he's coming to Pitt. He'll be a redshirt junior this fall, which gives him 2 years of eligibility to play with the Panthers. He's about 6'4", 245 pounds. You might look at that and say, well, that's a little bit light for a defensive end. And you might be right. That, we could sit and compare, well, this guy was this or this guy was that. It's probably a little bit lighter than they would like their defensive linemen to be, their defensive ends. But I think Chief Borders has an interesting story. I think it's interesting where you look at what he was doing at Nebraska and kind of how you have to sort of project the way he's going to fit into Pitt's 4-3 defense, because Nebraska didn't run a 4-3 defense. I don't know if you watch much of Nebraska. I really didn't watch much of Nebraska, but they were using a 3-3-5 defense. I don't know if they installed it prior to last season, and it was relatively new then. But Chief Borders often found himself playing in the jack position, which is an outside linebacker that really has a lot of pass rush responsibilities. Looking at some of the other guys, if you looking on Pro Football Focus, if you look at Nebraska's defensive players last year and sort them according to pass rush snaps, a number of times they rushed the passer, number 3 on the team was a guy playing that jack position, Jamari Butler. Number 4 on the team, just in total pass rushes, MJ Sherman playing that jack position. Number 6 on the team, just in total pass rush snaps, Princewell Umanmilan. And I apologize, Princewell, for mispronouncing your last name, but Princewell had 6th most pass rush snaps on the team. Chief Border, who played in a reserve role, was 12th on the team in pass rush snaps. And so that jack position, it's one of these outside linebackers in an odd man front defense, a three-man defensive line, with an outside linebacker that largely functions in a pass rush role. And so those guys I just mentioned, Jamari Butler, MJ Sherman, Princewell, those 3 guys, saw the majority of their snaps rushing the passer. Now, a lot of their time was spent in run defense as well, but if you look in, what they did on snaps where there were pass plays, so, let's take Jamari Butler, the number 1 jack linebacker last year for Nebraska. I think he was on the field for 241 passing plays, and he rushed the passer on 228 of those. MJ Sherman was on the field for about 217 passing plays, and he rushed the passer on 162 of those. Prince Will was on the field for 172 passing plays, rushed the passer on 142 of those. You get the picture. It's a very pass rush heavy position. And this is where some of the projection comes in with Chief Borders, because he wasn't really playing with his hand on the ground all that much at Nebraska. From what I've told, they tried it a little bit, didn't really feel like it felt like he was more effective as a pass rusher from a 2-point stance, standing up and rushing from the outside, than he was necessarily from, when he put his hand in the dirt. And you might look at that and you might say, oh wait, and now Pitt's going to use him as a defensive end where he has his hand in the dirt. How's that going to work? But keep in mind of where a in this case, a 3-3-5 defensive line, a 3-3-5 defensive end is going to line up. He's not necessarily going to be outside the tackle the way, so that 5 technique or 7 or whatever it is that Pitt uses with their defensive ends. They're not trying to scoot in between a tackle and a tackle and a guard. They're not trying to eat up blocks to let the outside linebacker make plays. The defensive ends in Pitt's defense, much like Nate Matlack coming from Kansas State, looking to get out of that 3-man front and move outside to more of an edge rushing role. That's what the defensive ends do in Pitt's defense. That 4-man defensive front has those ends coming off the edge, trying to get around the tackles and get into the backfield and make plays. And that's not really something Chief Borders did with his hand in the ground. Now, he did rush the passer from outside, but he was standing up. And so there's a little bit of projection there. But there's some interesting things, though, about Chief Borders. If you look at his, like I say, some of these usage stats, his on the pass plays. So he was on the field for 80 passing plays this past season. He rushed the passer on 66 of those. That's a lot, but 14 out of 80 is a decent percentage. And on those 14 plays, he was dropping into coverage. And this is what's really interesting about Chief Borders. When we go to Pro Football Focus and look at his snaps by position, yeah, he played the bulk of his snaps up front. They call it the D line, but really he was edge rushing, standing up, right? But he also played, about 30 snaps, what they call in the box. So, kind of moving around more in between the tackles, but still standing up almost in like a linebacker spot. If it's as a, 3-3-5, you have your 3 linebackers, they're going to shift left and right a little bit. So almost playing like an inside linebacker kind of role. Played slot corner, so lined up over the slot on three snaps. Played a ton of special teams on coverage units. I think about 58 snaps on coverage units over the course of 12 games. Really all over the place. And this leads into a few things. One, I think it speaks to his athleticism. And again, he's 6'4", 245. So he's not the heaviest guy on the field, but 245 pounds is still a decent amount of weight to throw around out there to be able to run with and run effectively and be athletic enough to move at that size. But it also speaks to intelligence, I think. He was at Nebraska for 1 year. And to move him around and do all those different things with him, and again, in a reserve role, but to trust him to play in different responsibilities, coverage, stopping the run, rushing the passer, lining up over the slot, lining up in the box, lining up outside as an edge rusher, I think speaks a little bit to sort of his intelligence. I think he's a smart player, and this is something I've heard from multiple people. I think he's considering Stanford coming out of high school, which obviously speaks to some intelligence there. I was talking to some of our people that we know that cover Nebraska, and they said one of the first things is he's a really great kid, he's a really nice kid, really good person, and really smart. And so I think that's important too, because as we've talked about Pitt's defensive end depth, how they only have 8 defensive ends and 3 of them are true freshmen and 2 more redshirt freshmen. So they have very little experience. If they're going to bring in a transfer defensive end at this stage, they're probably doing so counting on him to contribute, hoping for him to play and be a rotational guy this year at worst. If you're going to do that, you better have a smart player who can pick up the defense quickly. We've talked a number of times in different ways about some of the transfers who left Pitt. Some of the guys who maybe have 1 year of eligibility left and they went to another school, and there's a legitimate question to ask about how quickly are you going to pick up the defense at your new school? Are you going to pick it up and absorb it and process it well enough that you can really get out there and make an impact in 1 year? And Chief Borders has 2 years to make that impact, but I think he should be the kind of guy who can pick up the defense quickly enough that he can move into it. Shouldn't be an understanding of the defense that holds him back. If he doesn't contribute this year, if he doesn't play a lot this year, it shouldn't be because he didn't get it. And I think the Pitt coaches are looking at it like, okay, here's a really smart guy. So he's going to pick up our defense. We think he can figure it out. He's athletic. He's quick. He's fast. Let's put him on the edge and turn him loose and let him go. He hasn't played in a defense like this. He was at Florida for 2 years. I don't know what kind of defense they ran there, but I mean, when you look at what he did at Nebraska this past year, he never really did what Pitt is going to ask him to do. And it's the same thing with Nate Matlack. And there's a little bit of projection there. And I'm sort of reminded of what we've talked about with Jeff Capel a lot lately, of finding, I don't want to use like a goober term like market inefficiencies or some nonsense like that, but finding guys who are doing the thing you need them to do, but they're only doing it a little bit. And then projecting that if you ask them to do it a lot, they'll do it at this sort of the same level, that they'll be able to do it well. And that's what I think Pitt is looking for with Chief Borders. Okay, he didn't do this a lot. He really didn't put his hand on the ground at all. But the way he rushes the passer off the edge with his athleticism and his speed and his quickness, we believe he's good enough that if we put him out there, yeah, when he had his hand on the ground, he wasn't great because he was lining up, inside the tackle. But we believe if we put him outside the tackle, maybe even let him stand up. It doesn't matter. 3-point stance, 2-point stance, whatever it takes, have him rush. There's somebody on the message board who keeps asking if Pitt would ever switch to a 3-4 defense. I mean, if you have a guy like Chief Borders and he's lined up at the end of your defensive line, whether he's got his hand in the ground or not, you're almost sort of personnelling it as a 3-4. Whatever you want to call it or however you're going to use him, that's kind of, it's sort of what it ends up being. Of course, one of the clips that has gotten a lot of notice by Pitt fans since Chief Borders committed was Nebraska head coach Matt Rule saying that Borders is, maybe the most improved player of the spring. Seemed really impressed with him. Said that he didn't say a light bulb seemed to have gone off, but he sort of gave that impression that a light bulb kind of went off for Chief Borders, that he's sort of figured out, hey, I'm actually pretty good. I can play. And he said, quote, he's a problem out there. And that's positive because we know that Pitt needs every boost it can get at defensive end. And it looks like Borders is going to give them some of that. Now, I'm not going to sit here and overstate it of he's going to be a starter and he's going to have 10 sacks or something like that. But when you look at the group, there's almost a feeling of anything would be, a help. Any help is good. Any help is needed. And I think that Chief Borders is more than just a body that you're going to throw out there. He doesn't just make them better just because he's joining a group that needs anybody they can get. I think he makes them better because I think he's got a high ceiling, and I think it's an interesting projection from what he was doing to what he can do at Pitt. Now, there's something very strange. There's one thing we have to point to is I was doing some research on Chief Borders yesterday and watching some press conferences and listening to him speak. Definitely smart kid, definitely very nice, outgoing, gregarious and all this stuff. I look forward to interviewing him. But there's one thing he said during a press conference this spring, and I had to do a double take. Let me know if you have the same reaction.
How do you work on your mindset? Like, what do you do mentally?
So another thing is like mindfulness. I do the Calm app. I like to meditate a lot. Another thing that I picked up on is Kenny G. I listen to Kenny G before I go into practice. He's a game changer. I got that from the movie Gran Turismo, and that actually just helped me just kind of slow my thoughts down a little bit more and just kind of focus on the game a lot better.
Wait, did he just say Kenny G?
Another thing that I picked up on is Kenny G. I listened to Kenny G before going to practice. He's a game changer.
Kenny G? Like Kenny G? Like Songbird Kenny G? Yes, Songbird Kenny G. This is what Chief Borders listens to get his mind right before practice. You know, I always wonder what players are listening to on their headphones before practice and before games. When you go through warm-ups, you watch warm-ups, you know, those early warm-ups where guys are just sort of trotting around the field a little bit at Acrisure Stadium, and they got their headphones on. I always wondered what they were listening to on their headphones. I gotta say, I never guessed that it would be Kenny G. But hey, Chief Borders is bringing in a new perspective on things, and he's bringing Kenny G. I wonder if Pittsburgh's own Tom Atkins will eventually someday play Chief Borders in a play, like the Chief Part 2 or something like that, and Kenny G will likely be involved with Songbird. But look, everybody, I think there's been a strong push, you know, but seriously, folks, there's been a strong push to try and for Pitt to get a defensive end, bring somebody in to help shore up those ranks and you know, build the numbers and build the talent a little bit. Obviously, they added 2 defensive ends in December with Nate Matlack and David Ojebwe, but after Dayon Hayes went in the transfer portal and Nate Temple got hurt and lost for the season, they clearly needed something else. They needed more because they, like I said, they had 8, and 5 of them were true freshmen or redshirt freshmen with little to no experience. So, yeah, somebody who's at least played a little bit of college football, somebody who's a little bit older, you know, more mature physically. They needed to find something, and I think they found it with Chief Borders, and it looks like a pretty good ad from here. You know, it doesn't seem like anybody in Nebraska has anything negative to say about the guy. It sounds like they were disappointed to have him lost. All the reaction when he went into the transfer portal was, this is Nebraska's first big loss to the portal. I think there were high expectations for Chief Borders in 2024. They were projecting him to have a very good season, but you know, those names that I listed earlier of guys who were at the jack linebacker position at Nebraska, Jamari Butler is done. It looks like he's not back on the roster this year, but the other guys are, plus like a true freshman. Who was it? There's one other guy coming in, and it's one of those names that's gonna make you feel old. Where is it? Hold on, I had this. It's gonna make you feel old. I don't want to guess at it. Where is that name? Oh man. I'm sorry for Willis McGahee the fourth. True freshman at Nebraska this year. I forget if he enrolled early or what, but he's from Miami. Willis McGahee, Willis McGahee's son, coming into play. The jack linebacker position, probably one of the players that made that room feel even more crowded for Chief Borders. I don't know if he was scared off by Willis McGahee the fourth, but I'm scared by my own mortality, of which I am reminded by knowing that Willis McGahee's son is now in college. So, yeah, this happens every now and then. You know, you see one of these famous names, somebody you definitely remember, and you think, oh, he's already got a son in college. But Pitt already has a defensive end now. They've got, you know, if you look at the depth chart now, you know, you see how it ends up shaking out. I still think Nate Matlack will be a starter, but then for that other spot, you're going to have competition with Bam Brema. You're going to have competition with Chief Borders. You're going to have Jimmy Scott in the mix. Sincere Edwards in the mix. It's still not a terribly deep group, particularly if you're talking about experience, but it's deeper now than it was, 48 hours ago. So they've improved in that regard. They've added more depth. They've added an experienced player, an older, more physically mature player, and somebody who I think has a pretty high ceiling and a lot of potential. So seems like a good ad. I'm not sure that it solves all the problems, but I'm not sure that there was really a solution out there that would solve all the problems at defensive end. But it gives them a better chance of having a good, productive defensive end group in 2024. So by that regard, it's a good addition. We'll see if they add any more here over the next few weeks. That could be it. I wouldn't be surprised if that was it, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But either way, whatever happens, we will talk about it here on the Morning Pit on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to get all of your Pitt sports news. Football, basketball, and recruiting, it's all right here at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I appreciate it. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope all the moms out there had a great Mother's Day. And, yeah, enjoy your Monday. Hope your week gets off to a great start. And we'll catch up with you tomorrow to talk about all the latest Pitt sports news right here on the Morning Pit on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.